Test 1, Test 2. Test 1, Test 2. Hey everybody, Alex Azora, SteelersDepot.com.
Test 1, Test 2.
I got to turn
Test
them
1.
off. Okay, sorry about that. I had to always forget to turn the audio off on my phone, because that's how I look at the stream, because it's just easier that way. So thank you guys for being here. Mutated Genome, know you're always one of the first ones here. Thank you very much. Logan DiLorenzo, what's up? I'm doing well. Hope you guys are doing well. A lot to talk about. Combine coverage up on Steelers Depot. Got a new mock draft dropping in the morning for you guys, bright and early. Version 2 for me and my projection of which direction this team is going to go. But I will say the Combine probably didn't provide a whole lot of clarity in terms of who they're going to take, just simply because we still have so much roster construction to go. Whether you're talking cap casualties, of which there should be several for Pittsburgh, and whatever moves they do make in free agency, the little moves that they will, and just overall draft layout and pro day attendance and all the things that we nerd out about over on Steelers Depot. So I have the Combine numbers up. You can just type in Combine results on Steelers Depot, and we have all the results tracked. I think we still want to maybe look for some 10 splits for some of the linebackers in the secondary. We do have it for the defensive line. But you can check that out. We can go through some of the highlights and lowlights from guys at the Combine. If you would like to see a specific position and have me overview how I thought that group did and who stuck out and who didn't at Indy, feel free to do so. If you have a question in the chat, feel free to ask it, anything Steelers related. I'd be more than happy to try to answer. Yeah, Logan, we know the meetings we're telling. We know we met with. We don't know all the meetings, obviously, and some are informal, and those probably mean less than the formal ones, the ones that were the 18 to 20 minute formal ones, of which you only get 45 this year because of the changing in format. So you had to be more selective, and they probably mean a little bit more than the 60 in the past. So pro days are starting, and that'll be fun to follow and track. Cecil Clark, I'm doing well. Thanks for being here. Be here for about an hour, as we always are every Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, to talk anything Steelers. And I'm still going to try to do more videos and different videos. Just haven't really had anything that I wanted to highlight in a video. So, confidently that I wanted to do a video on it. But the Combine, kept my weekend pretty busy. But we'll have some more videos in addition to, obviously, our live streams every Monday. Mutated Genome says, how high are you on Albert O? Do you think his 40 time will put him out of reach for the Steelers? No, I don't think necessarily it will. It's certainly eye-catching in a pretty weak tight end class. The next fastest time behind his 4.49 was Bryson Hopkins and Stephon Sullivan running 4.66, so a pretty big gap there. But I don't know if we really see that on tape with Albert O.K. It's by Albert O, because I don't even know how to pronounce his last name. So I don't know if it's going to separate it that much. There's still questions about overall agility and, can you change directions? And this stuff probably means more for a tight end than pure straight line speed that probably doesn't play like a 4.49 kind of guy on tape. So, yeah, tight end class, it wasn't great, which we already knew. Probably a little bit worse than what I was even expecting. But I thought Hopkins had a decent workout overall. I thought Trotman had a good workout, and anyone who thought he was going to run like the 4.6s or something just was fooling themselves. I think 4.8 is a respectable time. You watch him on tape, he plays faster. Just watch him at the Senior Bowl, played a lot faster. And that 6.78 3-cone is really impressive and kind of speaks to some unusual athleticism for a guy. Remember, that's 6'5", 255, so not a small guy, not one of these slot, hybrid receivers that you get so often in the college game. He was a hand-in-your-dirt, three-point stance, love-the-block type of dude, which the Steelers really covet. So, small school, obviously going to be fighting against them if you're Pittsburgh, but we'll see if they have serious interest. He probably will not be at his pro day, Tolman or Colbert, because they're not going to go to Dayton for one guy unless he's going to be at like Ohio State's pro day, where he's going to go to some bigger school, which would help him out, maybe get eyes on. But we'll see if he's brought in for a pre-draft visit. I think he pretty much has to be for him to be considered for Pittsburgh, but it is certainly possible. Yeah, Alberto, his times here. Well, he didn't do any other testing, I don't think. He ran 4.49, which again is really impressive. For 6'5.5", 258, 34 and 8th in terms. That is a profile of a Steelers tight end. So there certainly is validity in making the case for him. And that 40 time, again, by far the best of anybody. Wish he would have done some of the other drills to get a better overall profile on him, but maybe he knew he wasn't going to test too well, and he was going to just take that 4.49 and run with it, literally. That's kind of my guess there. Hunter Bryant, what do you think? No, I don't see it with Hunter Bryant. He didn't test nearly as well as people thought he would. I thought he could be one of the best testers for this class, but running 4.74 at 248, 32.5 in the vert, 9.7 broad, 7.08 3 cone. With his size, 6'2", 248. I mean, you think about it, the tight ends this team has drafted. They haven't drafted a lot of tight ends, but even guys like Heath Miller and Mark Bruner, and then in recent years, Zach Gentry, Jesse James, all these guys are 6'5", 250, and length is important too as a blocker. Really, it's more important than height. Even so, 32-inch arms is below. Their average is about 33 inches. If you look at the tight ends they drafted under Mike Tomlin. So, don't really see it for Hunter Bryant. Just too short, too small, and didn't profile enough as an athlete in terms of the measurables to, I think, really be a good candidate for Pittsburgh. Mutated Genome asks, if Bud plays next season under the franchise tag, do you think they'll look for his replacement in this draft and let him walk after 2020? Colbert called it before the Combine an unusually strong, that's his word, unusually strong outside linebacker edge class. And that was surprising because I did not have that feeling going into the Combine. I do not have that feeling coming out of the Combine. But that is usually a sign that they're interested in an edge guy. Curtis Weaver from Boise State, I think, actually fits a lot of boxes. Let's find him. I don't know if he was with the linebackers. Yeah, he was with linebackers. I mean, the Steelers like their guys big. He was 6'2", 265. Not the best length, but he's only 6'2", but good size. The weird thing with Weaver was that I'm pretty sure he didn't run a 40. NFL.com does have him listed for a 4.84, but I watched it live, obviously. Went back and watched it on YouTube because they post the highlights and cut-ups of all the 40 times. They did not show Curtis Weaver running at all at the Combine, yet they have him at a 4.84. So I don't know what's going on there, and it's more interesting because he had a great 3-cone time of 7 flat, 7.00, which is excellent. You kind of want to be 7 seconds or under is ideal for these pass rushers. So if he actually did these things, then that's great. I mean, I just don't know for sure because they have him for 40 times that I'm pretty sure he did not run. So it kind of calls into question the validity of these other times. But Weaver's a guy that makes sense. Josh Uche from Michigan is a guy I've been high on, higher than Dave, for example. We've had some good discussions going back and forth on his projection. I see him as a top 50 player. So, roundabout way to answering your question. It would still surprise me to see them address it high, but it is fair to say they probably will draft an edge guy to at least compete, to have some options for next year should Dupree be gone a year from now. And then you at least have some options with Ola and Skipper and a potential possible draft pick in the mix that at least give you a couple options to weigh if you can't retain Bud Dupree. It's a fair question, though, because the long-term future of Dupree is still in doubt, even though it's all but certain and now reported the team will use the franchise tag on Dupree. Are there any possible second-round D tackles? I could give you one name that really fits if you kind of want a Hargrave replacement. That's Neville Gallimore from Oklahoma, but he ran 4.79 at 304 pounds, and so it kind of makes it tougher to think a guy like that's going to last the 49. His agility drills were not very impressive. A 5.01 short shuttle, a 7.97 3-cone is pretty bad. Now, for context, I think Javon Hargrave had like a 7.9 flat in the 3-cone at his Combine workout. But there are issues with Gallimore with balance and playing out of control and a little bit of hip and ankle tightness, more so than what I saw on tape, to be honest with you. But I think he's a good kind of one-to-one replacement that's really kind of a freaky athlete overall in open grass, and I think actually is a pretty good pass rusher that maybe needs to get a little bit stronger versus the run. But I do see a lot of similarities with him and Javon Hargrave. Beyond that, it's tough. I looked at Ross Blacklock from TCU, but coming in at 290, not the best length in the world. Tested pretty well, but that one, I think he's kind of more of a classic 4.3, 3-tech under tackle. So in the second round, it's kind of hard to find a fit. You talk about some more mid-round offense. I look at Devon Hamilton from Ohio State, Rashard Lawrence from LSU. In terms of late-round guys, there's a kid from Baylor that I could look at, and then Benito Jones from Ole Miss at 6'1", 316, more of a classic plugger that's on the ground too much, unfortunately, and that's my biggest complaint with him, but is kind of a more classic run stuffer that tested like it running 5.26 and some pretty ugly, vertical and agility drills, but that was expected with him. That's not a surprise. Allie Howard Species, thank you very much for joining the chat. I appreciate it. Again, you guys have any questions, let me know in the chat below. Going over Combine stuff, have a mock draft going up tomorrow morning on Steelers Depot, version 2.0 for me post-Combine. So let me know what you guys think about that when it drops in the morning. Nick Mark, I've been meaning to catch the show, man. God, do I miss Steelers football? It's only a couple months away. Thanks for being here, Nick. I appreciate it. Don't think Bud gets a tag. See, so I think there was a report from ESPN today that said that the Steelers are expected to tag Bud Dupree, and that's kind of been ever since Tomlin said he's a priority, and Rooney echoed those statements. It kind of felt like they were going to make sure they retained him in some form or fashion, ideally with a long-term deal, but franchise tag as a last resort or to buy time for a long-term deal. So be very surprised if Dupree hits the market. I think they're going to tag him, and it's going to cost about $16 million. So again, you guys have any other questions? Let me know in the chat. We can kind of cycle through some of the other positions here. Just kind of go down the line. Quarterback's obviously not a position the Steelers are going to address. Not a ton you're going to learn from measurables here, but I thought overall, Love and Herbert still fighting for that third quarterback spot. That's probably the most interesting thing from a medical standpoint. Seems like there's good news on Tua. He's probably going to stay in the top 5, no later than Miami at number 5. Maybe a team trades up for him. And that was really about it. Eason showed off a big arm. I thought that was impressive. Some guys were impressed by Anthony Gordon from Washington State, James Morgan from Florida International, Steven Montez seemed to have a good day. Overall, kind of reminds me of Ben in terms of the size, just being 6'4", 231. Just kind of had that frame and look of it, but again, not expecting the Steelers to have any sort of interest in the quarterback. Parker Jensen asks, how will they afford the tag? Restructure some contracts. Yeah, they're going to have to. We mapped this out on Steelers Depot on a podcast maybe about a month ago. Basically, the way to get there and still being able to, by the way, tender guys like Mike Hilton and Matt Filer and Zach Banner, you're going to have to cut Chickalo, Foster, Barron. Now, the interesting thing was we had Vance in that category too, where they would have to not pick up the option on Vance. It kind of sounds like they're planning on picking up the option on McDonald, which makes the math really tough. So, fair question. But yeah, basically, you'd be cutting Foster, Chick, Barron, restructuring Ben, and extending Hayward are kind of the best ways to go about it. If the CBA does not get done by the time the new league year starts, just a week or so in advance. If a new CBA gets ratified really soon, that's going to help the Steelers, can give more cap flexibility, and you kind of don't have to deal with the 30% rule being the hindrance. But that's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen this week in all likelihood. So you're really running out of time there in the sense of hoping a CBA gets done from a pure Steelers cap perspective. So basically, a lot of restructures. Well, really one with Ben, an extension with Hayward. That's going to free about $6 million, I believe, roughly. And then cutting Chick, Foster, Barron, and Vance. Maybe there's a way to make it work with Vance still, but that's kind of a baseline approach of how to do it. It does take a lot, absolutely, because that is $16 million, and that is not cheap for a team that is very cap-strapped. Can they really afford to sign Bud long-term? When TJ's time comes, they would have 2 extra linebackers earning top 5 money. That's a good question, and that's a fair question. I don't have the answer to that. I don't know what their cap allocation plan is. I'm sure there's a way to do it. It's just always, what is the cost? If I sign Bud Dupree, can I not sign player X? Or I run the risk of, losing this guy, Juju, for example, just hypothetically. I mean, so obviously you could do it, but you always have to ask yourself at what cost, what position is that going to put yourself in, and what is the future of your cap. And I will say, though, I said under the new CBA, the cap should start flying up. Anytime a new CBA gets done, new TV deals to get done, new revenue for the league. Like the CBA, the cap is expected to go up a lot. Not for 2020, but starting 2021, it could go up like 20%. Roughly, we don't know, but it sounds like it's going to go up a lot, and that will create a ton more cap space to be able to do things like sign Bud Dupree. So if the Steelers are expecting the cap to shoot up over the next, starting in 2021, then you have more cap space to work with, you have some more breathing room, and then it's probably a lot more feasible to get it done. Now, there's a cash aspect to it, too. Can you literally afford it? I mean, I don't know where the team's at there. I have no insight really to offer there. That's a consideration, though. There's cash versus cap, but that would be an element that would obviously help the whole league, but especially a team that does not have a lot of working room like Pittsburgh. So it is possible. We'll kind of have to see what the cap situation looks like a year from now. But yeah, obviously, Watt will always be the priority over Dupree. That's a given. Watt's going to get done. He'll be very, very expensive. We're talking over $20 million easily. Could be 23, could be 25, depending on when the deal gets done. Other contracts that happen around the league. So it is a fair point, and that's why somebody asked earlier, could they be planning for life after Dupree in 2021? Yeah, that is possible. Absolutely. Parker, you're very welcome. Corey S says, so what are some of the big things we learned from the Combine? Moss is undersized. What else? terms of the overall takeaways, I mean, that's such a broad question. The receiver class is as good as advertised. Really strong top to bottom, all types of guys. If you're looking at speedsters, big jump ball winners, slot guys, there's really kind of every flavor at receiver in a very, very strong class, which is reflective of the college game. The tight end class, we kind of learned that, it's even a little worse than I expected. Still some talent, still some guys I like. I still like Hopkins, still like Trotman, for example. Moss obviously took a big hit based off of another foot fracture. That's going to be his third surgery, and he's got surgeries on both feet already, and his size overall and already limited athleticism, that's going to hurt him. But the running back class, again, we knew was a good class. Jonathan Taylor, really impressive. Don't think he'll be there for Pittsburgh yet, 49, but if he was, even though I've kind of downplayed the idea of taking a running back, Jonathan Taylor really fits what this team looks for at running back. 5'10", 226. Running 4.39 is absurd. I was kind of down his athleticism. I was wrong about that. I'll admit it. Though on tape, I don't really see this guy as 4.39. I honestly don't. But with his size and his insane production, that is the quintessential type of running back this team looks for. So, definitely some talent at running back, and value could present itself at 49. O-line, I think we learned tackles are great. Interior offensive line, you're going to have to hunt for some talent there. It's not going to be the easiest thing to do. D-line, I think it's an athletic group. Interior, probably didn't learn a ton about them overall. Did it with the linebackers, very athletic group. Again, very reflective of the college spread game, where athletes are a premium. And corners and safeties, again, I think about as expected. Maybe safeties a little bit weaker than usual, but that is a position this team has to look at. And they like sparky guys, like athletic guys, and there aren't a ton of those guys that kind of fit in terms of a more mid-round type pick. Someone like Antoine Winfield, for example, probably off the board by the time the Steelers come calling, even at 49. And if they wait, then there's a list of options that fit that athletic, sparky type of safety. They're numbered. Which is expected. Safeties that are super athletic tend to go pretty high. So, still some work to do, homework for me to do on evaluating the safety class. One mock had the Steelers drafting Nathan Stanley, plays like Ben. Yeah, if you were going to take one, you would take one early and say, let's find a franchise guy. We don't think Mason's that guy. We made a mistake. Let's try to correct that. Taking a late round guy, a flyer, I assume they had Stanley in like a 6th, 7th round. Really just pointless. You already have competition there with Duck and Paxton Lynch. Only 6 picks overall. To choose from. I don't see the point in taking Stanley or any other quarterback in general, especially one on day 3. Ollie says, do you think we still draft a pass rusher now that Chicolo is probably gone? Yeah, I think it's possible. Based on Colbert's comments, he called it a strong edge class. Again, I seem to disagree with that assessment, but what he says ultimately is the only thing that matters, him and Tomlin. So yeah, I think an edge guy is certainly on the table. Now, where will that be? Harder to say. Will I have an edge in my mock draft tomorrow? Well, I'll go check it out. I think it'll drop at 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. I may or may not have an outside linebacker in that group. I did not have one in my first one, but that may change for tomorrow's. Yeah, Hard Punk Core Cat's going to continue to rise. Yeah, that's what I said. The expectation is it'll continue to rise on this new deal, and then as you mentioned, that's a good point. For Ben's retirement, could give him a lot of cap relief, though. Hopefully, obviously not really expecting that to happen for 2021 when Bud would need a long-term deal, assuming he plays 2020 on a franchise tag. Corey says, how do you feel about the few articles out there of us looking at Haskins if the Skins pick Tua? No, I have no interest in Dwayne Haskins. I saw some of those things. I had no interest in Haskins. I think some of that's a smokescreen. Even if it isn't, it doesn't matter. Pittsburgh's not in play for Haskins. Not going to happen. They're happy with the quarterback situation. They're not going to make any sort of movements there. Caitlin, thank you very much. I appreciate that. That's awesome that you just finished up at Disney World. Thank you for those comments. Parker says, overall thoughts on what you think the Steelers will be looking for in the draft? Yeah, it's still hard to say. I think it's still pretty wide open. You have, again, receiver, interior offensive line, running back, defensive line. And again, you look at running back and interior offensive line. Is that talent going to be there at 49? There's a need there, but if a tight end's off the board, if a Trotman's off the board by then, Cole Kmet is another tight end I mentioned, could be first tight end off the board. Will the value justify that? And that's questionable. And if it doesn't, then you go with more quote-unquote luxury picks like receiver and running back. Running back, I still think is probably pretty low. I think receiver is a lot more likely than running back, but we'll see. You really can't say for sure here, this far out. Corey says, I agree on Haskins. Seemed a bit crazy to me, too. I thought I'd be missing something. Yeah, Haskins, I think that's... I mean, there's no report that actually is credible. There might be some speculation about that for clarification. But, yeah, I just can't see them having any sort of interest in trading for Haskins. I think that's just the boredom of the offseason. Lawrence Davis, do you think Steelers should pick Anthony McFarland out of Maryland? If you're going to take a running back, you're going to take one early. I do like McFarland. I remember watching Durham Gray last year, and he was. I watched McFarland because of me watching Durham Gray, and he's an interesting guy. He certainly popped on some really bad Maryland teams, but I don't have enough interest in taking a running back that late. I think so. If I was going to take a running back, I mentioned Antonio Gibson from Memphis, who worked out with the receivers. And, he's a guy that's probably more running back than receiver, very similar to Tony Pollard, who went in the 4th round a year ago. I think Gibson has less production, really just a one-year guy. But I would be interested in kind of a blend, someone like Jalen Samuels, but more explosive, can offer you something in the return game. So unless you get somebody like that, more middle rounds, I really don't have interest in taking a running back. I think there's enough competition there already with Connor and Snell and Samuels and Kareth White. So, yeah, unless it's somebody very specialized like Gibson, very explosive like him. I do like McFarland. I think he's fun to watch in open space, and really, again, popped on some bad Maryland teams. But no, don't have enough interest. Not only if you had 10 draft picks like last year, maybe. If you had more capital, more money for free agency to address needs, possibly. But not with so little money to really do nothing impactful and appreciable in free agency, and only 6 draft picks. Just really got to focus on taking care of the needs. Chad Weiss, did Justin Jefferson put himself out of Steelers' range? It's tough because it is such a strong receiver class, and so those guys will get naturally bumped down. But yeah, I mean, it does look like it. 6'1", 202, see the numbers here. 4'4", at that size, 37.5-inch vert, 10.6 in the broad. Productive guy, not one of those DJ Chark type of guys that they never threw the ball at LSU, so it was kind of tough to really judge his tape because it was such a limited sample size. I think he had over 1,000 yards last year, obviously playing with Joe Burrow. So yeah, I mean, he may not be a first round pick. I think he's kind of on the edge, but to get to 49, it's hard to see. I mean, maybe. I don't want to make any blanket concrete statement right now, but yeah, I just can't see it. It's more unlikely than it is to happen. I'll put it that way, there, Chad. I'm going to drink water real quick. I apologize. Samantha Eckborn, hey, thank you for being here. I know you're here for every single week, so I really do sincerely appreciate that. Again, going through some combine results. Have a mock draft going up in the morning on Steelers Depot. Hardpunk Core asks, which player did the most for himself at this year's combine? Wow, that's a good question. It's so hard to try to say who's the singular winner in that sense. I think Jefferson is a really good candidate for that. I think Taylor really kind of questioned some of those concerns that I personally had about his athleticism. The linemen were ridiculous. I think Tristan Wirfs, we're not going to talk a whole lot about some of the top linemen in this draft, but just a crazy good workout. And Isaiah Simmons from Clemson running 4.39 at his size is really impressive. So, it's hard to really say which guy. I'm sure I'm missing some name in here that someone's screaming at me for some obvious name right now. Just trying to think about everything that's happened over the last couple of days. But I don't know if I have that one name. I think Isaiah Simmons, though, kind of stole the show. I don't know if that helped him the most. I think it helped solidify him in like a top 5 spot. But he was already going to be a top prospect heading into this thing. But I was disappointed Akeem Davis-Gaither did not work out. I don't know if there was an injury or not with that. But really like Akeem Davis-Gaither. Had a great week in Mobile. Probably a potential top 100 pick. I like A.J. Dillon from BC. Yeah, another freaky guy to talk about guys that really helped themselves. That's certainly one of those guys. I mean, how many, Dave Bryan will talk about it. He loves the term, and rightfully so, the planet theory. How many big guys can move like this? 6 foot, 247, went in 4.53, jumping 41 inches in the vert, 10, 11 in the broad, and a pretty decent 719 3 cone, 23 in the bar. I haven't watched his tape yet, but I think Ben Fennell gave a TJ Duckett comparison, which on paper seems to fit. So yeah, kind of a freaky dude from that aspect. I have not really gotten into his tape really at all, but very, very rarely. I mean, the list of guys, I don't know if there's any guys that have been 245 plus that have jumped 40 inches in the vert before in terms of a running back. I mean, I doubt it. If there are, it's you can count on one hand the number of running backs in the last 20 years that have probably done that. So interesting players certainly based off of that alone. M. Kaiser, now that the combine is over, are you leaning towards a certain position or player with a second round pick? No, I mean, I haven't really leaned to anyone. Again, there's so much roster construction, so many events that have to happen from now till then, I should say. So it's hard to really give any extra clarity. I think a lot of this is going to go into some of the pre-draft interests and the pro day visits and stuff like that. That'll be very impactful. In terms of position, it's hard to even whittle that down because, as I said earlier, you got to go through cap casualties, who's going to definitely be cut, what positions they may sign. That'll help maybe put a band-aid on things. Though, to be fair, the Steelers have no problem spending even decent money in free agency and still drafting guys high. I mean, you look at last year with the top free agents that they signed. It was Steven Nelson at corner. It was Dante Moncrief at receiver. It was Mark Barron inside linebacker. What they do with their first 3 draft picks, they drafted an inside linebacker, a receiver, and a corner. So certainly they didn't feel like they had to stop when they brought in all those free agents. So really any free agent probably wouldn't alter off-season plans at all. 2 years ago, Morgan Burnett signed at safety. Well, then you draft Terrell Edmonds, so it really didn't prevent the team. That's a short-term fix for agency versus a long-term fix in the draft. That's their philosophical makeup. So long answer, I'm being very rambling here because I just don't know. I don't have that answer for you right now. I mean, there are some guys that have kind of checked off, probably aren't going to make it just overall in the draft. Thad Moss, I looked at Jalen Elliott from Notre Dame, who I thought had good tape, had a decent on-field workout, but if you're a safety that's going to run, where are you at here? 4.8 flat for Elliott. I mean, in general, that's, very few safeties in general are successful running that kind of time. But in Pittsburgh, they love sparky guys. Sean Davis, Micah Fitzpatrick, Terrell Edmonds, all guys that really had good spark scores. And Elliott's not really going to have that. Some better numbers here in the broad and in the short shuttle, but 4.840 just not going to cut it. So there's some guys that kind of eliminated, some guys that might be liking a little bit more, but it's still very, very muddy right now. Mutated Genome, you and Dave have had some back and forth about taking the tight end at 49 at this point. Are there any tight ends that you would consider a mistake passing up for 49? That's a good question. It's an important question, Mutated Genome, but it's really hard to say because it just depends on the board. I know that's such a boring, cliche answer to give you, but just anywhere where you're picking, it's always kind of depending on what the situation is, even if you had a first-round pick. But when you're picking 49 and things are even hazier, it's really, really hard to try to make any sort of guess in terms of how big of a mistake it is, because what if you have somebody like, let's say Denzel Mims, for example, from Baylor? You ask the question for what guy's kind of impressed the most. I think my answer might be Denzel Mims from Baylor. What if he's there? I mean, he would certainly carry a higher grade than maybe even a number one tight end on your board, and so you got to value and evaluate the value versus the need and the grade. So there's a balance there. So I mean, I still think Trotman and Hopkins, I'm still high on those guys. Those are probably the top 2 I'm circling. I want to look at some more. Cole Kmet, worry about some of his change of direction stuff, but certainly has the profile of a Steelers tight end. I will say, though, and I said this in the podcast on, Friday, after the tight ends worked out, that if you don't get one of those tight ends early, you probably just punt on the position. I think it's pretty consistent with what I said before. I think there was talent at the top. I think the depth overall wasn't that great, and it wasn't certainly a banner class for the tight end position. But there's really nobody day 3 that's going to pique my interest, and really even if you drafted somebody day 3, they're not going to really be that long-term slam dunk. This is the guy we can kind of hang our hat on and develop. I mean, they may turn into a number 2, but probably not a number 1. And you're drafting the position a year from now anyway, so what's the point? So there are some interesting, maybe UDFA candidates. Wood Anderson from Tennessee. I want to check out Dalton Keene from Virginia Tech. I think both of those guys are interesting in terms of blockers, but not being a number 1 upside type of guy. So tight end, again, it's still very high on my list. I want to make a long-term investment in the position, but it just depends on what the board looks like at 49. If those guys are there, are they gone? Who else is there? Trade back, possibilities. I mean, a lot of things to answer that we can't answer right now. Lawrence Davis. So somebody named Levesque Christian out of Colorado will be a better fit. I don't know. Oh, do you think McFarland? Okay, you were asking about McFarland earlier. Yeah. Somebody like that. Like I said, yeah, the Gibson hybrid type of mold. Now I don't know where Chenault's gonna go. Ultimately, you'd be taking him much earlier. You'd probably have one bite at the apple at 49 if he even slips that far, which he may not. He needs surgery. He's had a lot of injury history. That's gonna be the concern with him. How do teams evaluate him medically speaking? But yeah, somebody in terms of if you can kind of find that interesting hybrid type of guy, because I don't mean to harp on him too much, but I struggle with, like, how does Jaylen Samuels really help you? Where does he win? He's kind of a jack of all trades guy. Yeah, he's an okay runner, okay receiver, but he's really not great in any one area. He's not going to provide any sort of explosive plays to your offense. So I just can't see. I can see competition there in terms of a better version of Jaylen Samuels if you can get someone like Antonio Gibson that can do things like Jaylen Samuels, but be a bigger playmaker, be a lot more explosive than what Samuels has really failed to do. So if you can get someone like that, I'm interested. If not, then I'm certainly fine just passing up the position entirely. And then next year, you might be looking at quarterback. Next year, you might be looking at running back, but not this year. Corey asks, do you rate Deante Johnson over James Washington at this point? What do you think our receiver depth chart looks like to start the season? I don't really rank them in that sense, and everyone always asks about who's the number one, who's the number two, but I just look at the position that they play. You know, Deante Johnson plays the X receiver spot, AB's old spot. James Washington plays the Z receiver spot on the outside, the opposite position. So they're both starters in that sense. If you go with 11 personnel, Juju's in the slot, Washington's on the outside is the Z, and Deante's the X. So I don't have to rank them because I just know what position they play. It's like ranking Villanueva versus Fowler. I mean, you can rank them, but they play different positions that can be on the field at the same time. But obviously in two receiver sets, it's going to be Johnson as the X and Juju as the Z, Washington on the bench, and then in 11 personnel, which are playing 70% of the time, Washington then comes on the field. So it's really a moot question to me, honestly. I mean, I think Johnson might have some more upside, certainly really impressive rookie season, but they're just different types of players. I mean, Washington's your vertical, downfield, 50-50 ball threat. Johnson is more of the three-step game, winning one-on-one, backside slants, backside X receiver, and all that stuff. So they're just two totally different skill sets, two totally different positions. Any possible diamonds in the rough with a late-round guy? Yeah, still searching through it. I'm sure there are. I don't have any great names that are coming to mind right now. You'll see some of my late-round selections in my mock draft tomorrow. I don't know if I have that gem above all else yet, but trying to think of a name. I don't have a great name for you right now. Hard punk core, but hopefully I can offer something a little bit later in the draft process. Trey Edmonds worth keeping. Cecil asks, he'll be in camp, but very narrow path to make the roster. I obviously got the call up last year after all the injuries in the backfield, but if everybody's healthy, which you never know. I mean, injuries are certainly going to happen, and Connor's injury history is unfortunately lengthy, but at most they're going to keep 4 running backs. They were keeping so many last year, up to 5 last year, because Rosie was on IR, so yeah, they're keeping 4 plus a fullback. Generally, it's 3 plus a fullback. Yeah, it's just I can't see the path for Edmonds unless there's an injury, but he'll be in camp, and we'll see what happens. Looks like we finally franchise tagged Bud Dupree. Is that official now? It's not. I haven't checked on Twitter or anything, so somebody tell me if this is news. The report was that they were going to tag him, so it hasn't happened officially by the team yet. They have until I think March 12th to do it. They usually wait till a couple days before, so maybe there's some news that I missed, but it's not been official, at least as of half hour ago before I jumped on the podcast. That was the report, and has always been the expectation, but it had not been confirmed by the team unless that changed in the last half hour, which someone can tell me. I haven't been able to check on Twitter or anything, but I don't think it's actually officially happened yet. Just expect it to. Do the Steelers cut Vance? My guess is no. Now, how do you get that? How do you get Dupree under the cap that way with a tag? It's a good question, but it felt like based on some of the things Kevin Colbert said that he's going to be in their 2020 plan. So still up in the air. Still have until I think the start of the new league year, March 18th, to pick up his option. And I don't know for sure which way it's going to go, but leaning towards that he'll be a part of the team. Joe Clark, do you foresee a prospect that will spawn a debate between you and Dave like Devin Bush did last year? If it's going to happen, it's going to happen maybe with 2 guys. I would say another Michigan guy, something about Michigan linebackers, Josh Uche, who we've already kind of talked about a little bit, gone back and forth on. I'm higher on Uche than I think Dave is. I think it's a guy that can rush and cover and is a good athlete and productive and high character and all that. And those are things that are very valuable in the NFL. And then tight end, and just kind of our evaluation of the class as a whole. I'm talking about guys like Bryson Hopkins and Trotman. I think we've already had some really good debates back and forth on that. I totally see some of his points. He's right. If you can't get somebody early, if no one else worth taking, the depth is pretty poor in this class. So I'm guessing those are where the 2 ones are going to come from, Josh Uche and the tight end class as a whole. I think we already kind of had those discussions already on the podcast. Okay, still rumored. Yeah, my guess is that there was a report from ESPN that said that they're expected to. So it's Washington with Brandon Scherff. So I don't think it's happened officially. but you can almost guarantee it at this point. Devin Stone, I like Stephon Sullivan. Yeah, he's interesting. I just don't know what to do with him. Like, he's a tight end, I guess, but he's such a long, lanky body that really has never been a three-point stance before, and how good of a blocker really is he, and his agility scores of 4.62 in the short shuttle, 7.51 on the three cone. Like, those are O-lineman numbers. I'm sorry, I'm looking at Pinkney. I apologize. Or am I looking at Sullivan? Nope, I am looking at Sullivan. Because Pinkney did not participate. Okay, then my point stands, 4.62. And 7.51 are really poor. So he's a guy that's explosive in a line. 36.5-inch vert, 10 threes, 4.66 at that size is solid. But change directions, there's a problem. He's just a very high cut, leggy, long dude that was a receiver turned tight end. I don't know what you do with him. He's a late round flyer, 6th, 7th round, but it's hard to have a whole lot of confidence in what he will be. He may be something, maybe not. I like the guy. I like the story. Talked to him at the Senior Bowl. Rooting for him, rooting for all these guys. A guy that grew up out of poverty and has a chance to make something, which is awesome for him and his family and those around him. But it's just trying to find the fit. But he will get comparisons to Darren Waller for sure, and some of that is valid. Who is your favorite player you've studied so far, regardless of the position? I would probably say the guy I mentioned earlier, Denzel Mims from Baylor. Just a lot of fun to watch, and he goes out there and crushes the combine. And had, DK Metcalf crushed the combine last year, and then we were talking about his three-cone time for the next 2 months until it didn't matter anymore. But Mims not going to have that concern. I mean, 6.66, it's the best three-cone time for any receiver, and he's a big guy, too, that you would think is kind of stiff, and the numbers don't indicate that. So, yeah, I'm a really big fan of Denzel Mims, not only as a receiver, but as a blocker. Really just fanatical, tenacious, intense blocker, which is always kind of fun to see, because you don't see a lot of receivers that block a whole lot, especially big play ones like Denzel Mims that probably don't have to block, but certainly want to block, and really, really like Denzel Mims. Phil Massey, who's your favorite right D-man? Right D? I don't know. Am I missing something with that? We talking hockey? We talking Penguins? Phil, if you could clarify, that would be great. Maybe I'm just missing something and being dumb. I don't know. That's possible. Chad Wee says, Pinkney, Hunter Bryant, and Moss Stock got hurt the most. Yeah, Pinkney is borderline undraftable at this point. When you're running 4.96 at tight end, the history of guys that are run 4.9 plus at tight end and been successful is very, very, very limited. So probably going to follow the draft altogether. Maybe someone's up. Got decent tape, but man, that number 4.96, just not going to happen. Get similar to freshman in the Davenport story he's talking about him doing this thing. Dave and I were just debating last year. I think it was really about Bush's productivity or lack of splash plays, where he didn't really have a lot of turnovers, had a lot of tackles, some tackles for loss, but I think one career interception, very limited in the forced fumbles, pass deflections. So we kind of had a debate, like, how concerning is the lack of turnovers and takeaways, and can he become a takeover or takeaway and turnover machine in the NFL? He's not doing it in college. And we had a debate about schemes and opportunities and plays that you make that you don't see on tape, like flying in for a 1-yard tackle that just looks like a tackle, but is much more impactful when you watch the tape. I compared it to Ryan Shazier, who I think had one career interception, I believe, at Ohio State, and then was an interception machine. So I think the skills translated more. So we just had a back and forth on that, but we both liked the pick. We both liked Devin Bush, and obviously very happy with the job he did as a rookie. Thank you, Phil. I don't know if I answered your question, hey, Mutated Genome. I'm sorry, you did ask a question. I totally skipped it. I apologize. Heard John was stand again last week. That's very cool. How far in advance is your appearance scheduled? Usually it's just kind of the day or two before, so nothing is scheduled right now. Hoping and happy to be on again in the future. I'm hoping and I'm betting that I will be, but there's nothing currently scheduled right now. But thank you for listening. I appreciate that. When the offseason hits and the most of the first isn't available during the turnout, how much would it be instead of the second-term contract scenario regarding Hilton and Cam Sutton? I'm trying to figure out what the first part of your question says. When the offseason hits and the most of the first isn't available during the turnout, how much would it be instead of the second-term contract scenario regarding Hilton and Cam Sutton? I don't quite know what that first part is, unless you're saying about Hilton maybe not being at some of the offseason stuff because of a contract dispute. I mean, you're basically asking how much money is it going to cost Hilton or Sutton on a second contract. It's going to cost a good bit. And I've talked about this before, comparing it with like Kenny Moore from the Colts, who's getting like $7 million per year. Yeah, that's probably going to be Hilton territory. So it would be expensive if Sutton Well, I guess something's coming up after this year too, huh? Because Hilton's going to get tended. So yeah, it's not going to be cheap for nickel corners because they're playing so much, and they cost accordingly. So they're going to cost $6 to $7 million per year. Not having a first round pick hurts the Steelers. Yeah, I mean just in the general obvious sense of you like more draft picks, like more talent, more options, but you can't be mad about it. Clearly, when you weren't going to get a better player at 18 than Minkah Fitzpatrick. You probably maybe not getting a better player at 5 than Minkah Fitzpatrick. So you're not mad about that trade, but just intrinsically, if you don't have a first round pick, I mean, it's a big chess piece off the board, and that's going to hurt any team regardless of the situation, including Pittsburgh. It's not going to kill you, but push them to shove, you'd like to have a first round pick. Yeah, Corey, you're right. If Fitzpatrick is your first round pick in the end, we're not going to get a better player than Minkah Fitzpatrick at 18. And plus, he's still cheap and under contract for a couple more years, so it wasn't like you were trading for a guy that had a year left on his deal that you were going to have to pay, and then you're balancing, you get a better talent, but you're also paying that guy earlier, and that whole aspect of it. So very, very happy with the Minkah deal, and I think everybody recognizes that. You can be a little wishing you had a first-round pick, as everybody, reasonably would, and still say, well, obviously, you would do that trade in a heartbeat to trade for Minkah. I would. 99% of Steeler fans would. Do you like Kyle Duggar? I do. Had a good Senior Bowl week, and again, him and Jeremy Chin just showing what the NFL demands. Them and Isaiah Simmons. Chin's out there at, where is he at here? 6'3", 221, running 4.45, 41-inch vert, 11.6 broad. Duggar, 6 foot 217, 449, 42-inch vert, 11.2 broad. I mean, those are guys that can be scheme versatile, can match up against running backs and tight ends and some slot receivers and even bigger receivers. I mean, they can just kind of be an answer. If you're a defense coordinator, you have a lot of answers in your game plan because you're going to face offenses of all shapes and sizes, varieties, and ways to attack, whether they want to go spread, running back matchup nightmares, heavy with tight ends, running quarterbacks, schemes, whatever. And it's hard to have answers for that if you guys just aren't versatile. The Steelers defense saw that 2-3 years ago where they were just very static. They didn't have a lot of versatility. They did not have enough answers, not enough packages to be able to counter in all situation football, all game plan football. And these guys can really be the cure-all to answering a lot of those questions where you don't have to have 10 guys that are talented, because you can't get 10 guys to be able to do everything. You can't find someone talented enough to shut down running back, or another guy to take tight ends, another guy to take running quarterbacks, another guy to play the run, play coverage, rush. I mean, you just can't find a guy to do every single thing. You can't pay them. You can't assemble that much talent. Yeah, no one can do that really. So to have one guy that can kind of function in all those roles, like a Tyrann Mathieu, for example, is really, really valuable in the way the NFL is going. So guys like Duggar and Chin and Isaiah Simmons are those freaks that can wear a lot of hats, and the more things you can do, the more value you have, and with that height, weight, speed, those triangle numbers, it's really impressive, rare, and those guys get paid and drafted accordingly. Did Bush live up to your expectations as a rookie, and do you think he will make a huge leap in year 2? Yeah, I think he played really well as a rookie. Maybe got a little quiet towards the end, but still happy with his body work overall. I think he'll take on an expanded role, be an every down type of guy, assuming Mark Barron's cut. And so, yeah, I think he will take a leap forward. Absolutely. Yeah, everyone was upset with the Minkah deal, and I'll admit that I was skeptical of it, and I was concerned about it because just the crazy, lack of precedent to do it. I mean, I wasn't mad about it the way some people were, and anyone who said, oh, why are the Steelers playing for now with Ben going down? I mean, they weren't seeing the forest through the trees. Like, this was a short-term move, sure, but also a long-term move as well. Knowing that Sean Davis was injured, going to hit free agency, and if you didn't make the trade for Minkah, we're sitting here talking about the free safety they got to draft to replace Sean Davis, and we're having the same conversation just with an unknown prospect they may or may not get in a sort of weakish safety class. So there was a lot of silliness from the analysts in terms of the reaction to the Minkah deal. I'm not going to say that I was predicting the impact that it would have and how good it really would be, but I was certainly not mad about it, and definitely saw the value in it, and really didn't have a whole lot of a problem with it. Any chance the Steelers double up at any position? Yeah, there's always a chance. When you have 6 picks, it's more limited. When you have more holes, it's more limited. But, you double up on day 3, just kind of based on a value thing. If a guy's just that much better than the next guy available, then it may just come to that. So I don't know if you go into a draft intentionally saying, let's take 2 of X position, but it may be, well, you've taken a receiver early, and there's a receiver in the 7th round that just has a much better grade than the next guy on your board. And you say, well, we want to take this guy because it's 7th round. Let's try to maximize talent. I mean, you saw that linebackers last year with Gilbert III and Sutton Smith and the like. So, and obviously Devin Bush in the 1st. So a lot of linebackers going there. Sutton was obviously more of an outside guy, and Gilbert and Bush were inside guys. But yeah, it's always possible. Just I don't think you're going with a plan like that. But if the board dictates it, then so be it. I'm really surprised big DBs haven't become the norm yet. It's just hard. There aren't many big DBs that can move like that. There are a lot of tall DBs. I mean, this class is full of them. You see a lot of guys here over 6 foot. I'm on corners here, but are you athletic enough to turn and run? And some of these guys that are 6 foot that can run, they're playing receiver early in high school, and that's kind of their career arc because everyone's looking for receivers. That's the name of the game. But yeah, you gotta find guys that can cover at that size and speed too. But so the guys that can, it's rare. It's tough to find. A lot of these guys are too tall, too stiff. That is my concern with Justin Lane, for example. We'll see if he improves, but my concern was the hip tightness and the lack of long speed, despite being a bigger guy. But if you can find them, then you covered them. You absolutely covered them. Did the combine make you notice anybody that previously hadn't thought much of, or vice versa? Anybody make the bum meter go off? Well, like I said, I think it was a really terrible time for Thad Moss. For a guy that didn't participate, I mean, he can't have much worse of a time with the foot injury, obviously, and the way that he came in at 6'17" is really disappointing for him. So for Pittsburgh, that really knocked his value down. Talk about Jalen Elliott earlier. In terms of guys that really impressed, I'd have to go back and try to think about the list. I think Justin Jefferson did a nice job. I'm trying to think about on-field drills as well, but nothing really coming to mind right now. Let me think here. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. Just go back and read through some of my articles on Steelers Depot that covered the combine. I think that maybe it's a better way to encapsulate my thoughts day by day than me trying to look at this whole last 4 or 5 days and trying to sum it up, because it is kind of hard to think back and wade through everything. How far do we think Moss is going to fall in the draft after the combine disaster he had? Yeah, he's a day 3 guy. I don't know exactly how far back he's going to be, but I thought he could be mid to late day 2. Now you're looking very much day 3. Partly going to depend on the medical situation, what teams red flag him, how he's going to progress from this surgery. I mean, he had a foot fracture like 2 years ago, and he had to get 2 surgeries on it because the first one didn't fix it properly. So will that happen again for Moss, or will he have an easier time of it this time around? If he has another surgery, then that's really going to hurt his stock all the more. So not going to be able to work out at LSU's Pro Day, I assume. Yeah, I don't know exactly how far he falls. It is a weaker tight end class. That might help him a little bit, but you're looking day 3 and probably not an early day 3. What will happen with Sean Davis in the offseason? Any chance he comes back as depth, or will he have a good market? It depends on how you define good. He's not going to sign for the minimum or anything like that. I don't expect him to come back to Pittsburgh. I think he kind of saw the writing on the wall once they traded for Minkah. He probably wants to start somewhere. I mean, this had been a 2.5-year starter before getting hurt and Minkah coming in. So I think there might be some sort of market for him, but I don't expect Davis to come back to Pittsburgh. I would love it. If he did, that'd be fantastic for the right price, but I don't think it's going to happen. Yeah, Corey, I think Davis will try to start somewhere, or at least just go somewhere where he kind of feels wanted, because, business is business, but you trade for Minkah, that's pushing Sean Davis out the door. You tear your labrum, and a week later, this guy's got your job they're trading for, so that's got to sting if you're Sean Davis. Duck Swagger, I'd be specific here. I know you don't think we are or should take a running back high this year, but who is your favorite from this class? Well, like I said, Antonio Gibson, I think, is a really interesting guy. Maybe in round 4, like where Tony Pollard went last year, that can kind of be a hybrid and be a multiple type of guy. I mean, 6'3" or 6'3" ace, 228 that runs 4.39, really good numbers overall. That's interesting. I mean, I like a lot of these guys. I like, Edwards-Helaire from LSU. I like Jonathan Taylor, though. I still had some questions about him. P. Ryan is a power, no-nonsense kind of guy. The kid from TCU is interesting. McFarland I talked about earlier. I mean, Joshua Kelly had a good week and is a really good guy to root for. So, I mean, there's a lot of guys that I like. It just, is the need going to dictate that you take a running back high? And if you wait on a running back, then what's taking one in the 6th round really going to do for that position? Probably not a whole lot. So, with only 6 picks, it's just, again, if you had 10 picks and some free agent money to maybe go sign, a nose tackle or backup safety or something like that, I think the board opens more for running back. I just don't think it really fits this year with a combination of all those factors. Yeah, Hurts, I give him a kind of a poor man's Deshaun Watson comp. I think a guy that teams are going to love in the interview room, really commands the room well, very intelligent player. Not quite as athletically gifted as Deshaun Watson, but certainly a mobile guy that is just kind of a winner and a leader, and some very valuable traits in terms of intangibles for the quarterback position. So I do love Jalen Hurts. Corey, what cheap bottom of the barrel free agents do you see us taking a shot with? I had an article on Steelers Depot that went through some of the safeties. I'll pull that up actually here really quickly. I will continue to do some more free agent option and articles maybe later this week, maybe next week before the start of the season, a new league year, obviously. But they're not a very it's not a very fun list. And safety honestly might be some of the biggest names I had on my whole list. But Jeff Heath from Dallas, who's coming off shoulder surgery, should bump his value down a little bit. Been like a 3-year starter for Dallas, probably not really best fit as a full-time starter, probably more of a backup sub type of player that can definitely impact special teams. But Jeff Heath, I like. Miles Killebrew is kind of like a Tyler Medikevich, but just a safety, and not a particularly good safety, but good special teams player. Will Parks from Denver, probably going to be too expensive. I think the biggest name on my list is Will Parks from Denver, but had the famous forced fumble on Xavier Gribble at the goal line 2 years ago. I wrote 2019, or it should be 2018, whatever. But he's gonna cost too much for Pittsburgh probably. Deion Bush, I think, makes a lot of sense. Might be the best fit for Pittsburgh. Only played 59 snaps last year. Has only started, I think, 8 games since he got drafted by Chicago in the 4th round. But the Steelers had him in for a pre-draft visit, and they love to circle back on guys they had, draft interest in. So that was Steven Nelson, Dante Moncrief last year, Darius Green in past years, as I wrote here. I think Bush makes maybe the most sense of anybody on this list. A couple other names: Carl Joseph from Oakland. Steelers obviously liked him coming out of West Virginia. Kind of picked things up at the end of his Raiders career. Got hurt with a foot injury 9 games in this past year. Will he cost too much? Potentially, but I think there'll be some interest there. And then Jaron Kearse from Minnesota, another guy that was a pre-draft visitor, played a little slot corner, play safety, bigger guy. Got a bit of a burn in Minnesota, but there are some cap issues. They want to re-sign their top safety, Anthony Harris. Kearse will probably finally hit free agency, and if he does, I think Pittsburgh could be interested. So those are some 6 safeties. I'll have offensive line and some receivers and some defensive line guys in the next week or two to kind of get some other options out there. So hopefully that helps. Oh, I see what's going on here. All right, Mike, the best right winger in the world. You're making me say these things. That's it's a NHL Chell friend for anybody who doesn't know what's going on with Mike there. All right, I will see you tonight at 10 o'clock, Mike, and better pass the puck for once. Hugo Gonzalez, how do you feel about Cam Akers? Yeah, I haven't really watched him super closely. But I know he's one of the top backs in this class and had a good workout at 5'10", 217. He runs 4.47. Just so that profile is impressive. So he's probably going to be 3rd or 4th back off the board. You got Swift, you got Jonathan Taylor, and all that. Yeah, I don't know exactly where he's going to be. I haven't studied him too closely. If he comes in for a pre-draft visit or they're at his pro day, we'll look at him more. I think there's a report on him on Steelers Depot. But yeah, I like the running backs in this class. It's not that I think it's a bad class. I think the biggest reason I could offer for them taking a running back, is the strength of this class. It is a good class. There's no denying that. But just is it a need compared to everything else? That's where you kind of get me at the running back position. I think they're just higher on James Conner and Benny Snell than a lot of Steeler fans are. Anyone you're disappointed with or didn't meet your expectations last season? Edmonds was a bit of a disappointment. Terrell Edmonds. I thought he had a great camp. Really excited. I thought he was going to make this huge jump, and he progressed. I don't want to misinterpret how his year went. He did get better compared to his rookie year, but obviously the lack of playmaking. His defense had 38 takeaways last year, and Edmonds had 0. I mean, he was just no turnover. He's got 1 fumble recovery, I think, and 1 interception in 2,000 snaps in 2 years starting, 30 starts, and that's historically bad. An article on that like 2 weeks ago. So Edmonds took a step, but not the step that I wanted to. So that's one, and then obviously the tight ends, McDonald, Vanette, both struggling. I mean, partially product of injuries, but also just a product of their own poor, inefficient play. So those guys I thought really struggled last year. Thank you, Corey. Yeah, I don't know when the next one will come out. It's probably going to be offensive line options. I don't know when that'll be. Maybe later this week, maybe early next week. I don't have a timetable for that yet. Antonio Gibson is my sleeper pick. That's from 98671X. Yeah, I like Gibson. Good guy. Talked to him at the Senior Bowl. I think he's more running back than receiver, but can help you in a lot of ways. Help you in the kick return game as well. Very explosive in the kick return game. I saw some articles saying the Steelers should go for AJ Green. Do people? Yeah, I mean, they're going to tag him first of all, but they have no money to go after AJ Green. So yeah, it's just off-season boredom fodder. Pay no mind, as I'm sure you are, Allie. Yeah, I like Antonio Gibson. I do. Would the Steelers be more successful if he were David GM? I don't know. I'll say Dave. I don't think I'd be a very good GM. I'd be drafting. I want to be keeping Danny Smith to be my head coach. I mean, not just for starters, and everyone would hate me for that, and it probably wouldn't go very well. But I think Dave might be a little more objective with this stuff than I am. I don't think we'll get to find out the answer to that one though. Alright guys, if you guys have any other questions, we'll wrap up the stream here in a minute or two. Again, we're here every Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks so much for everyone that stuck around. I really appreciate the chat being here. Again, I'll try to make some more videos. Have a mock draft coming out tomorrow morning, 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time on Steelers Depot, version 2.0 for me, post-combine. So I'll get my thoughts. Again, it's still very messy, very far out. This is kind of more of a who I'm guessing the team's going to like as opposed to actual real tangible interest. Future mocks will be closer to that. But yeah, hopefully you guys can enjoy that and give me your feedback on my mock draft for tomorrow morning. And again, we're here every Monday for about an hour, 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. So with that, I'm going to head out. Thank you guys so much for being here, and we'll talk to you soon.